Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For anyone who's been in the realm of psychedelic medicines for even a short amount of time, it should be no secret that these medicines have the ability to help us heal and create awareness. However, there are many other methods as well that, while they may not include psychedelics, are very psychedelic in and of themselves. Today's guest on the show is a clinical hypnotherapist, mindfulness teacher, and intuitive guide in this massive planetary shift in consciousness. She supports people to release negative patterns in their lives with practical tools like mindfulness, energy, and intuition exercises, and to connect with their true inner selves. In addition, she is also the host of the Courageous Path podcast, where she dives deep on the topic of meditation and is a well-established author, with her most recent book being Tools for the Awakening Soul, a guide to activate your intuition and uncover your life's purpose. And in today's episode, we will be diving into her journey, the aforementioned topics, of course, and her tips for you listeners on how to tap deeper into your purpose and your life as a whole. So, please help me in welcoming my dear friend Rachel Horton White to the show. Rachel, such a pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you, Ryan. I am so blessed and honored to be here.
Yeah, it was so funny. You know, we nerded out beforehand because we found that we don't live too far from each other, which it's not too often I talk to people that are so spiritually advanced that are from the Northeast, right? Because typically I think that even though there is a really big population here of it, it's not talked about as much and it's kind of a little more underground. So it's always nice to meet someone from my own backyard.
Yeah, right? A little north.
Exactly. And it's funny too, because we were also joking about how I'm going to be going to Maine tomorrow, right? So it's going to be like a 4-hour journey for me, which is amazing because I feel like for the last 4 days, I've been talking so much, which I love talking, but it's also nice to have some silence. And so when I realized it was like a 4-hour drive, not like the typical hour and a half, 2 hours to Portland, I was like, yes, this is going to be so much fun. So I'm coming to your neck of the woods. Great. It's going to be a blast. And, Rachel, I'm curious for you, how did this journey begin for you, right? Of course, we could dive into any aspect of the journey, right? Psychedelic medicines, clinical hypnotherapy, intuitive guiding, Akashic records, all of the things you do, because there are so many different things you do. But how did you first get interested in, let's say, the realm of psychedelic living, right? Because really, when I think about all of this, I think about how life is the psychedelic, right? We are intaking this substance called consciousness, which is then giving us an experience, right? So, a lot of the reason why I started this show was to, really exemplify the psychedelic nature of reality. And so how did you first tap into this in your own life?
To get to the source, I guess we could start with my dreams. And that is how it first started, was through dreams when I was a kid. And I would have dreams that would come true. I knew my mother was pregnant with my brother, who I'm 15 years older than. I had dreams about, I had a big car accident that was pretty major that I came across the next day. And I was like, I just dreamt this, So I was like, how does that work? How am I picking up on something that hasn't happened yet? And so that, and I also would have interesting sort of psychic things. And I was always curious about psychic stuff. And then as I got older, I started being interested in the tarot, and I taught myself how to read tarot cards. But then, as for many of us, I kind of left a lot of that behind. I just went the traditional path, went to college. I had a lot of it programmed out of me, right? Conditioned out of me. But it was going to come back. But I had to get to that place. And I think I see this now, where I was really at my breaking point. I had to reach my breaking point. There was a few breaking points. The first one was when I was in graduate school in Georgia, and I was engaged to this guy, and we broke up, and I went through this period of just real darkness. That's when I started practicing meditation. And I started with this Tibetan Buddhist, Shambhala Buddhist sort of practice, I would go to these classes. And I started learning about the concept of ego and the fact that I don't have this thing called ego, and I have thoughts that I don't have to listen to. And so that was kind of like really mind blowing for me, that I actually had this part of me that was a conditioned, like false sort of identity part of me, I guess, that I became aware of. And then fast forward to my husband, I kind of worked on law of attraction sort of stuff, envisioning, and I started, magical things. I manifested him, I like to say, or just aligned with his energy. We had 2 kids who are now 11 and 8. But then I was still in this like stuckness of my career. I was in nonprofit management, and I hadn't really been doing as much meditation, and I was always doing a long time yoga practitioner. I kind of stopped doing that stuff. But I got to the point where I could not stand to go into my job anymore. And I remember we got a book, like everybody in the agency I worked for got a book called Trying Hard Isn't Good Enough. And I remember being like, you know what? I'm done. I was like, I'm done. You don't pay me enough. You don't thank me. And you're telling me, even if I try hard, it's not good enough. It's like, wow. So that was like the boom, like that was the kind of, and I had been, grinding my teeth at night and just crying and angry. And I wasn't very present for my kids. And so I think, spirit speaks through other people. And my daughter's babysitter, she's like, you need to hire a life coach, because my daughter did, and she quit her job the next day and changed her life. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but for whatever, I'll do whatever it takes. And so I did. And the one thing this life coach, who was kind of spiritual, told me, she said, start meditating again and connecting with something higher than yourself. And so when I started doing those 2 things, I started waking up and, going through this whole like awakening process. I interviewed my grandfather, who was in the CIA. Both of them were in the CIA. And he, basically, his name's Ralph McGee. He was a whistleblower for what they were doing in Vietnam. And he was saying, I'm not going to comply with, you're telling me to tell people that the U.S. people, or the Vietnamese people support the U.S. being here, and they don't, and they want this war, and they don't. And anyway, they said, no, you can't say that. Change your reports. We're going to demote you, which they did. But anyway, he lasted, and he eventually wrote a book called Deadly Deceits, kind of disclosing a lot of the lies. So as I knew about this about him, of course, but I started researching it more because I had this podcast and I wanted to interview him, and I started finding stuff. And that's when all the little light bulbs started going off, and I started connecting the dots and seeing through the programming of society. And you talk about the psychedelic way of being. I started even thinking like, am I starting to go insane? Because what is reality? Like, I've been lied to about so many things, and I don't trust the media anymore. I don't trust what they're telling me. But then from there, I was just, started this business, became, the Akashic records literally came to me in a meditation. I learned how to read the records, was guided to hypnotherapy and regressions, and like way down the rabbit hole, doing life between life regressions for people now. And I do Akashic records readings more than anything else. But yeah, so I guess that's kind of leads me to where I am today, where I spend a lot of time in altered states of consciousness, mostly through my own mind, sometimes through plants as well. But a lot of it's just through light and intention. And so, yeah, there you have it.
That is amazing. Oh, Rachel, that's so cool. And, I love how you ended that with like the fact that, once again, a lot of what I talk about in the show is that, like, yes, psychedelics can shift your consciousness, right? But if you only rely on them to do it, then you're still externalizing your power, right? Like, these plants are amazing. They're here to be reminders, right? But at the same time, wouldn't it be really cool to be able to like turn that on whenever you want it without taking anything, right? And that's like, what I tell people is like, listen, you can connect with cannabis every day, all day if you want to, right? If that's what you think makes you happy, cool, go for it, right? You can connect with psychedelics every weekend if you want to, right? But let me ask you, right? Like, why are you choosing to do that? You obviously like the state that they're providing you, or the states they're providing you. Why don't you figure out how to reverse engineer that and get it into your life all the time? And I think that's one of the coolest things. And do you know a woman named Amy Belair?
Oh, yeah. I just watched with her we just chatted the other week. And yes, Brandon introduced me to her. She's pretty cool. Amy.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. I literally interviewed her like 2 hours ago,
no way.
So there's so many cross parallels. It's the coolest thing ever, and I'm super excited to dive in with you about all of these things, because I've had limited experience with them, but I've tried all of these things, right? Clinical hypnotherapy, Akasha record reading, past life regressions, etc. One of the things that I talk about often with cannabis is that with cannabis, because that's like my line of work, you can get into an alpha and theta brainwave state. Theta specifically is like what I focus on for this topic I'm about to mention. But, is that the same brainwave state that hypnotherapy goes for, right? Because I've always known that it was, right? And so, I've thought about one of the best parts of cannabis, right, where someone's maybe trying to learn how to reprogram their subconscious is to get deep into meditation with cannabis, where you can get into that very suggestible state. Have you had any experience in your own life or with other clients or things like that, mixing things like cannabis and hypnotherapy, or is it kind of just like not needed when you learn it, how to do it another way? Like, I'm just curious.
Personally, we're talking about plants, it's mushrooms. That's what I'm interested in the most. But I like psilocybin, but with hypnotherapy, I just keep it like straight hypnotherapy.
Of course.
But when that's just what I do, but I know there are other people that combine things anyway. So that's me personally, but anyway, but I think, when you talk about the alpha and theta brainwaves, definitely. Yes. I think theta is not always, I think we can get there in hypnotherapy. That's the goal. Delta is pretty rare. You have to get really, really deep. But definitely when I take people into life between life regressions, which is taking them into the spirit realm where they're meeting their soul group, they're actually meeting the council of elders, which is like who, in the Akashic records, and they don't have a body, which is really weird because I just did one the other day and you take them pretty deep because it's very easy to have that ego rational mind just be like, oh, this is just this, to block it because of fear, because we're not used to being in a floating around sort of state. So I think it is very similar. I think with plants, it's just, you can get there a little faster and you could probably do it without a person talking to you. So with I've tried to do self-hypnosis myself. And it's just harder, because it's so much easier when you have guides and like journeys, a lot of people, there's guides and you want, for some of them, as I'm sure like some of the like ayahuasca or something, you want an experienced, knowledgeable guide. But I think it's just, it's a lot more intense, with some of the plants. So it's faster in some hands, I think, with plants, but with hypnotherapy, it does take longer and you need that, that sort of guide. It's kind of interesting. I think it's similar, but different. the hypnotherapy doesn't have to have a spiritual aspect to it. Hypnotherapy, and it's like straight up hypnotherapy. I know some hypnotists and hypnotherapists who aren't really spiritual and they just do the reprogramming, but life between life stuff, past life, it becomes very spiritual because you're connecting with source, which, as you know, like when you're in with some of those plants, I remember just a few months ago, I had this experience with the mushrooms and I was just there talking. I was just becoming one with the source. Like I was just like floating up towards the light. And that's exactly what people report in life between life. Like they're just like, I just want to sit here and be with this giant ball of light because it's pure unconditional love. So it is very similar. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool you mentioned that too, because that's been my experience whenever I've obviously, like when I take high doses of psilocybin, even high doses of cannabis. I typically don't connect with cannabis in high doses. It's just a little bit of a challenging medicine to work with at high doses. And typically for like how I work with it for personal growth, you don't really need a lot, right? You just need a lot to like shift perspective a little bit to get the ideas coming through. But with psilocybin, on the other hand, there's always this point in when I do a high dose of like 5, 6, 7 grams where I break through. And it's usually like, if the trip is going like this, it's usually like right when it starts to peak and then come down a little bit. Right after that, I break through to this space that I'm just completely content being in forever. Like I can just lay and just stare at the ceiling and be completely entertained, like to a level where I can immediately not even the speed of light, like faster than that, immediately know the answer to a question before I've even finished the question, right? Like there's no reason to talk. there's no reason to ask, like, there's no reason to do anything. You're just being, right?
Yes.
And I remember like there was one specific trip where when I was younger, it was kind of like the first time I realized like there's something else going on with these mushrooms, where I cracked through to that golden light. And I was just there and I could feel all of my deceased family members there, my deceased pets. And I knew in that moment that everything was okay, that it was always okay, that it was always going to be okay. And that life was a sort of experience, right? Like it's not something that is objective. It's all subjective, right? And so like, what I learned from that is like, oh, I can create my reality. Here's this thing of seeing deceased loved ones, but instead of it being somber, it's like a joy and enjoying thing, right? Like, I have a lot of joy with it, so it's really cool being able to dive into your experiences too and hear that they're very similar.
Yeah. What you're talking about is oneness, and that is where, I mean, in my view, and I that's where we're moving as we move into, what I call like 5D consciousness. I actually I have the blessing, I guess, of going to Stonehenge and Glastonbury tour, which is this tower on the top of this hill.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really in those places, and there was a few other stone circles in Scotland that we were near. One of them's called Macri Moor on the Isle of Arran, which my son's named after. Anyway, but when I was there and we got to like walk inside the stones, not like now they don't even let you get close, and we got to like be right there. And I was trying to, and I actually decided to do a little video there, and I was trying to describe what it was like. And I remember thinking, I don't have any words for this because I'm just meant to experience it. And it's just a feeling. And I did remember seeing like faces in the stones, and I connected with them, and there were these ancient, really just deep stone spirits, like very, very like powerful, not scary, but just filled with power. And I knew I was getting some sort of activation as I was there. And I think, and it was partly that it was like what you just said, that there'll be a time when more of us will be able to use more parts of our brain, right? We're being able to access more parts of our brain. We're in these altered states of consciousness. And when we start to just get out of that small self of like, oh, I'm worried, what does this person think of me? And what am I going to do here? And like all these things that we worry about. And we'll be like, why do I care about that? Like in the end, we are all one, and I'm going to return to source. And I'm just here having this temporary human experience. And wouldn't it be nice if we just got to be there like more often than not? And I think we're getting there. And this is, we're all working on expanding our consciousness in different ways. But I feel like there will be a day, maybe in our lifetimes, when we actually will be like this more of the time,
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Yes, 100%. That's like, to me, the entire idea of Shambhala, right? Heaven on earth. Like, it's like that famous song, heaven is actually a place on earth, right? Like, it's not somewhere you go. It's not something even separate from you. It's something that's laying potentially dormant inside of you, depending on where you are in your spiritual journey, but it's always accessible. And, when I was talking to Amy earlier, she mentioned it as kind of like, it's like where we've been imprisoned, but the door is open, but we haven't yet been confident or courageous enough, and I say we kind of as a collective, to like just push that door open and have faith that whatever's on the other side of that wall is better than the prison cell we've been living in, right? The prison cell of separation, the illusion that we are all separate and that, there's really no point to life, nihilism, these kind of things, right? Like, I really feel as though right now for me, I'm being tested in faith, right? Like, as certain things get taken away of my life, right? As family members pass away, as challenges arise, can I keep the faith that everything is working out in divine timing, And that was like the big aha moment I had a couple of weeks ago. I'm doing a HTMA protocol with my buddy who's a doctor of medical Qigong, and HTMA is hair test mineral analysis. For anyone listening who might not know what I'm talking about, but he relates all of these individual minerals to like different aspects of consciousness, right? So if you have too high of calcium, you're going to have a calcium shell around your body, right? You're also going to be calcified, pineal gland, things like that. But one of the things I noticed in my nervous system was that I've been very upwound for a long time. And, it's not like I was drinking tons of caffeine or anything, but my system, I've learned this from an early age, and then I kind of forgot about it for the last like couple of years when I was running the business. But naturally, I have so much energy that I really don't need anything external. But then I'll fall into these things of like, oh, I'll have a coffee, right? And then because of the crash, I'm like, oh, I need more, right? And then I start getting myself into these belief systems that like, oh, I don't have enough natural energy. And so it's been amazing having faith in that process, letting caffeine go again, letting kratom go, because that was the other thing I would use for podcasts and things like that when I had to talk a lot. Been amazing because, in this completely non-stimulant reality I live in now, I'm more stimulated than ever, but it's natural and it's almost like a limitless well now, and so that's like an example of how these types of things have been playing out in my life recently. And I feel that for everyone I talk to that has been putting in time and effort and dedication into their spiritual journey, it's almost like we're all being tested to a level where a lot of us are like, why are we being tested like this? We put in so much effort, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, it's kind of like in Mortal Kombat, you got to face Shao Kahn as like the final boss, right? So this is kind of like, in my mind, like one of the final bosses of the level, and, again, not that there won't be another boss at another level potentially, but if we're purifying ourselves to get into fourth dimensional consciousness, then, and which is pure love, then anything that's a distortion from that has got to leave,
Yeah.
So it's an exciting time for sure.
Yeah. That was really coming up a lot for people this summer, and myself included.
Same.
Yeah, right? It's like, why is this coming up again? Like this thought pattern, like this is nonsense. I was like, this is so ridiculous that I'm thinking this, but I knew that it needed to be cleared, that I thought I had done a lot of the inner work, and that, exactly what you said, when I go into the Akashic Records to get a lot of my information, I'm like, okay, what's going on? Why is this happening? And it's like, well, you've got to in order to really carry the light that you're being asked to carry, that all of us are being asked to carry at varying levels to the point of we're spiritually, like we've signed our soul contract to say, yes, we're ready to do this now.
Yeah.
We had to clear out the crap, and and in order to clear it out, it has to come up to the surface, so we can see it. And I think it's the energies have kind of settled a little bit, but it keeps getting, there's a full moon now, and it's like, okay, it keeps coming and going and coming and going. But like I'll say to, some clients sometimes, they're like, why does it have to be so hard? Like they're just like, I don't want to. Even today, I had a client, she's like, I'm not suicidal, but I just don't want to be here. I just want to be home, in my real home, in the spirit realm. And I'll be like, I totally get it. But,
Yeah.
but the more we learn about our eternal souls, and that these are just temporary, bodysuits we have on for a little while, then it can kind of help it put into perspective, and we can take ourselves less seriously. And then we also, as we're doing that, we learn tools to kind of cope, like all these different things, that we're talking about, meditation, inner child. There's like the inner work too. There's like the inner child and past lives and stuff like that to kind of heal and clear. And then it gets easier. It gets easier to move through those cycles. Right.
100%. For me, I always think of it kind of like exercise, right? Like when you first start exercising, you're like, oh my God, this sucks, right? Like you're just like, I don't want to do this. I don't really care. And then potentially, right, you stick with it. And maybe you're not even working with a trainer, right? So maybe it takes you a little bit of time to kind of get your footing, but then you start getting the hang of it, right? And then you catch yourself like waking up and being like, I'm excited to go to the gym. When did this start, right? But then maybe you start working with a trainer who's now like, all right, I'm going to push you to the next level, right? So now, like, to use this analogy, it's almost like, we're all ready to full send, right? Like a lot of us on this path, like we wouldn't have signed up for this if we weren't ready. But now it's almost like, okay, well, now it's time for a metaphorical battle. It's not actually a battle, but it's kind of like, now is the time to like, okay, you've learned the tools, you've really practiced them. Now let's see what this thing can do, right? It's almost like, again, in another analogy, it's almost like if you've built a race car and you've spent so much time going to school to learn how to build a race car, right? Then you've saved up the money to go build the race car. Then you've maybe met people that have allowed you to join a car club so you can race the car. But now it's time to actually take it on the track, and it's your first race potentially, right? So you've prepared, you understand all the components of the car, you understand how to drive, but this is your first time potentially driving this car. And now it's like, do you have the faith in your own abilities that either it's going to send down the track or it's not, and you're just going to fix it and then it's going to send down the track. But so long as you can keep the faith, that car is eventually going to go down that track. The same way that, even if you get new sets from your trainer, you're going to eventually be like, oh, this is easy, and that happens to me frequently with my trainer. I've been working out for years, but I'll catch myself, like a small amount of me, whenever he tells me a new move, like, I don't know if I can do that, and then I just push myself into it and I do it, So I think that like the more that we all get kind of comfortable with the uncomfortability of this process, and the more that we come together and talk about it and laugh about it, because it is pretty hysterical, honestly, like that we have these meat suits, but we're really a soul within it. And then when you look at like the powers that be and everyone that's tried to convince us that this is all there is, like it's actually a really funny movie, like that's how I choose to view it.
It's like one of those ridiculous sitcoms,
Exactly.
from the 70s. It's all in the family or something. Three's Company, like it's so funny, but not. Yeah, and and that message comes up a lot when I, go in the records or connect with different guides. They're like, stop taking yourself so seriously, have fun. And I'll just say, like, when you were talking, what I was, was coming up is the spiritual practice, that I have, and I know you have, and just that form of like surrender. And it's essential in my view to have something higher that we're connecting with. For some people, it's the spirit of the plants. I know I often do retreats, and there's this woman who helps me cook food for the retreats and stuff. And she always brings cacao, and we always do a raw cacao ceremony. We're always connecting with Mother Cacao, and it's a beautiful, like easier way. I mean, technically it's a psychedelic, right? It's a really big heart opener. Yeah. And I, but it's beautiful way that we're kind of honoring Mother Cacao and connecting with her energy. And so you can do that with anything. I do that with trees, when I go out and connect with the energy of the trees, and of course with light, and then I have my different guides that I connect with, Jesus being one of them, not in a religious way, but yeah. But that for me, it's like when I get stuck and, even though I do this work all the time, I still get stuck. I'll just try to go inward and just ask for guidance. And, I bring in imagine light flowing through my body, and that helps. And I say this, to people listening, because it helps me kind of be like, oh, I'm now, when we're doing that, we're coming up into our higher selves and getting out of our lower selves, and then asking for help. And then, usually something comes in, or we get sent, somebody will tell us something, or something happens to make it a little bit easier to help us understand like why we're going through something.
Definitely.
So that just surrender, and it doesn't have to be God. It doesn't have to be anything that feels like, there's a lot of religious programming a lot of people are healing from. Most people are healing from.
Yeah.
But anything that resonates with who, with you, whether it's light or just source or creator, or it's a plant spirit, or it's angel, something, I always like to say based in love, pure in love, like as long as it's based in love, because there are things out there that are not based in love.
Yeah. 100%. You definitely want to take some of those on by accident, and that's like, one of the things that I've been diving into a lot, reading The Law of One for the first time. Have you ever read that book before?
No, I haven't. It's the raw material, right? Yeah. I've not read it. I know of it. I think I've read pieces of it, but not the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool, and my buddy Aaron Abke that I met, he teaches from The Law of One and A Course in Miracles, and him and I have been nerding out, like trading magic tricks. I've been giving him all my cannabis stuff. He's been giving me all his Kundalini stuff. And he got me into The Law of One. And so I started reading it, and I love it because I've been such a big fan of channeling my entire life. Like, where other people were like, how do you know that's true? I was like, how do you know it's fake? Like, just like I've had like I've been very blessed in one way because I have an extremely open mind. Like, if someone wants to talk flat earth, I'm like, tell me everything. Like, I may not believe it, but like, I want to hear it. Like, because at the end of the day, like, I'm really aware that we know nothing, right? Like, and the point of being here is not to know anything, right? Because everything is subjective, right? So, we can know things for ourselves, right? Like, I know what I believe in. I believe in God. I call it God, right? And so, like, I know who I am in this moment, but I don't know who I'm going to be tomorrow. I can make a guess, but who knows, right? And so in this book, they talk about how, there are the forces from Orion that are, I wouldn't say negatively influencing, because I think it's all like part of the grand show, but are influencing for self-centered service, right? Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like the negative polarity of what's going to become fourth dimensional consciousness, but also, I'm only like halfway through the book, so this is what I get so far from it, that a lot of the powers that be are being influenced by beings such as the Orion system and, other individuals. And, let's just say that I'll talk cryptically about this next part. Happy to give you more info off air about this. But, I've been a part of certain organizations that, I felt something, let's just say around, I'll be vague. And then people that are very big in the world of metaphysics and things like that have then corroborated those things, like to a level where I was like, I was feeling that the entire time I was there. But I was just like, oh, that's just resistance, And so I'm curious for you, Rachel, like, is there a way, I'm just curious about this. Like, is there a way that you distinguish between like resistance, right? Like maybe your ego resisting wanting to meditate or something like that, versus like, like a gut feeling of like, no, like, because this is something that has taken me a long time to get used to. And I feel like for men, it usually takes a little bit longer. Women, you guys are usually plugged into this stuff. But for a lot of the people listening, I imagine this may be valuable. So is there a way you distinguish that?
I'm so glad you asked that. I literally just did we're resonant. I just did a meditation talk yesterday on discernment and false light, which I don't always use that term, but it's important because it is coming up more and more. And even in, and I'm not going to badmouth anybody. I'm not going to use any specific names, but even in people that I like followed for a while and like I really look up to, and I start to hear things, not that, and I don't, and I start to be like, that doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
And Amy and I were talking about this a little bit off air too. So yeah, and it's true. I mean, there's so much now. I mean, I like to call them the ones who think they control things, so I don't give them any more power than they really need. But they are really pulling out all the stops. And in terms of darkness, I think it's important for people to realize that it's all about deception and trickery and like telling, like something seems good and it might actually be good partly on the surface, but it's designed, like you said, it's lacking empathy, but the energy is lacking compassion, and it's service to self or service, is manipulating other people, which becomes basically black magic. And I think it's easy to get sucked into that. Just a real quick example of this. I locally, there was this group that I had gone to years ago, and this woman channeling this entity. And it sounded really beautiful and full of light. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then all of a sudden it started saying like the air is going to become unbreathable and everybody's going to have to move to the center of the earth. And I was thinking, that might be true, but and then she kept talking about it, and I was like, I don't know about that. That doesn't feel right to me. So I feel like it's just creating fear. That's creating fear. And all the people listening. And then I left the group. I just went one time and I said, I don't know about this. Be careful. And I said, I believe she's channeling. I don't know what she's channeling, but I don't think it's pure light. And then the group kept meeting, and it got even worse because then they started telling people that all 80% of the people on the earth were going to die by a specific date this year. And so people in this group started like planning for this, like, well, everybody's going to die, so we're going to just do that, like end of the world sort of planning. That sounds a little cult-like to me, So actually, sure. It was really, it got even worse. I won't even get into it because it got even worse. It really harmed somebody I knew, like severely harmed her because she became like thoroughly brainwashed. Anyway, but for me, in terms of like discernment, I did feel that in the beginning. And I think for me, it started creating fear. And what I like to, my barometer is like for instance, I want to get into all this, but like with COVID, and all the things that happened, and then all this stuff after that, there's been a lot of death. And I didn't see that in the Akashic records. They didn't show it to me. And I believe the reason they didn't show it to me is because they didn't want to create fear. And they like, why would that be helpful for you to live in fear? I actually had somebody literally in Akashic records reading ask, like, I want to know when I'm going to die. And I told her, that's not they're not going to tell you that because you're just going to live in fear, and that's not going to be helpful for your ascension and for your soul expansion. And she understood. So my view is like, if there's a channeling that's coming through with any specific dates, because the spirit realm doesn't work that way. It's not linear, be aware. If anybody telling you something's going to happen on a specific date, be skeptical, in my opinion. And the fear stuff, it's like, some of that might actually be true, but it wouldn't come through that way. Because if any being that is purely of the light, that is trying to help humans, is not going to knows that it's not for our highest good to be in a state of fear. And so it wouldn't come through that way. And I think it's really bothered me a lot to see people just kind of totally give their power away, completely, like, hear one thing that somebody says or a few things and then say, oh, I'm going to listen. I'm going to follow them and listen to everything they say and just believe everything. Like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, what does so-and-so say I should do? And that is completely the wrong direction, because we're still giving our power away. This is just like what, people, did in the Crusades. They would go out and kill thousands of people because the church told them to. It's like, we have to stop doing that. We have to stop. We're, like you said, I know Aaron, I've listened to Aaron Abke's stuff sometimes, and I know he talks about this, which I love. It's like, we're being asked, and this is what, when I connect with Jesus, Yeshua, what his message is, like, he wants to teach us. And in the Akashic Records, it's the same thing, to trust ourselves and to come, to our own conclusion. And, back to what your question was, I guess I'm going along. I get really worked up about this.
Great. You trust me, me too. So I'm like, I'm like, preach. Yeah. This is perfect.
Well, to me, it's like, and I wrote a little article about this today, or literally this morning. It's coming back to the body and to light. So one thing I did this in the meditation, like, if you're not sure, the body usually can tell us. And one thing I intuitively picked up on when I was doing this meditation was helping people feel what connection feels like. What does it feel like to be connected to light? And it feels expansive. It feels like your heart's open. It feels like you're in this flow. And what it feels like to not be connected to light or something that's not a light, it feels constricted. It feels off. It feels even gross, like you're going to throw up or something. And that's like our bodies, because the ego can get involved, right? And be like, oh, maybe and I had that happen with that group. I was like, well, maybe I'm just, not open, or, and I quickly, though, I was like, no, this is bullshit, So I was like, that's it. No. But I think, if you can tune into just pure light, feeling light through your body, that's, you can never go wrong with light, because anything that's not of the light will be repelled from it. And ultimately, that's what we want to do, is like bring in so much light that we become like the sun, and we're just shining all this light. And so what happens when things get close to the sun now? They burn off. They can't even get close. And so we're just bringing in that light. And so eventually, I don't always do this, but I try to be like this. Like, if I bring in light all the time, like, I don't have to worry about these low vibrational things coming in, because the light's there. But there are times when it's not there, and I have to protect myself. So, or I have to do a little more. But I think so that, I'd say light, the feeling, asking the body. And then when we're in a situation where it's like, okay, well, is this feeling I'm having similar to the feeling I had when I was connected to light? And if it's not, then
that makes perfect sense, and that was my distinguishing factor as well. Like, I've long since realized now that, like, really the entire point of being here is discernment, right? Like, in one way, right? Like, the entire point is to really, like, be embodied in love and stuff. But at the same time, like, to be able to do that, to be able to really be embodied in love and light, etc., one must be able to wield the power of discernment, because there are people out there that truly believe they're doing the best that they can, right? Like, and that's what I tell a lot of people, is that's what makes it hard. Like, I really think that if you asked a lot of these people that, believe they're in control, they would honestly believe that they're doing the best thing for humanity, for themselves, etc. But it's up to us to wield the power of discernment and realize when something is coming from a distortion, and that's what makes life challenging. But at the same time, that's what makes it the fun game it is also, right? Because at the end of the day, the mind's going to want to figure out reasons, stories, etc. When in reality, it's just no is no. I was a part of an organization as well that, again, I believe was trying to do the best they could, but at the same time, like some of the ways in which they operate just started to become very out of alignment for me. With plant medicines and spirituality, it's a very interesting realm. I feel like there's a lot of bashing on both sides. The plant medicine community is like, oh, screw religion and spirituality, sometimes anyway. And then the more religious and spiritual side is like, oh, why would you ever use plant medicines? Mm-hmm. When in reality, I'm like, can you guys just like kiss and make up or something? Like, what is happening here? Yeah. And so the organization I was a part of, luckily for me, I've experimented with many medicines. I've had a spiritual practice for a very long time, and I've worked on my discernment. But a lot of the people this organization calls in, you can tell like a lot of people are wounded, right? Like this may be the first thing they found on their path. And that's fantastic that they're going out looking for things. But I think this organization fails to understand the influence they can have over these people. And so, even for me, like it started to penetrate me, which is when I was like, okay, this is definitely like, if this is like starting to get inside of me, this is definitely getting like brainwashing other people. And what they were saying were things like, oh, cannabis is going to steal your soul. Cocaine's actually better for your energetic body than cannabis. Just like ridiculous things. Why would you ever do plant medicines? You're not a plant. I'm like, that ideology does not make any sense. And I'm not there to ruffle feathers, right? Like if I'm in someone else's house per se, I'm not going to be that kid raising my hand like, actually, that's wrong, right? But after a while, I was like, this is so silly. Like, this is ridiculous, like, because a lot of the interactions, this is kind of like a 2-year story for me, right? So, a lot of the other interactions I was hearing from other students and things like that, just eventually I was like, I'm good with that, and it was funny because the second I stopped doing their rituals and I stopped, which I was like, I went balls into it. Like I did my rituals twice a day, every single day. I never missed a day in 2 years. Right. And so like I did all the things. What I noticed was after a while, if I, maybe woke up late or like didn't have enough time to do the rituals on my normal time, I'd start to have a lot of shame and guilt pop up. Right. Now, again, I take responsibility for that. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. So I dove into it, and it was just an interesting correlation. The second I stopped doing the rituals and started actually practicing more of what Aaron's been teaching me with Kundalini yoga, which is what I've been being called to anyway. Like I love altered states of consciousness, like meditating is amazing. Rituals are great. But for me, like breath work and those kind of things, like I'm an Aries, so I like to, interact with fiery things, and so right after I started doing that, things really started to pick up in my life again. And I'm not saying this is like the ritual's fault or whatever, but I think my perception of how important they were started to really get to me. And that's what I mean when it started to like impact me. And I was like, okay, let me get the hell out of here. So very interesting that you've had similar experiences in your area as well.
That's good that you had that awareness, because I think it sometimes some people get really deep into it, then I actually know somebody who was in a Gnostic sort of Christian organization, and it was beautiful stuff. Jesus, Mary, sounds like beautiful. But then the leader started telling people, oh, and you shouldn't, talk to your family anymore and go isolate yourself. And like some stuff that's like, that's not cool. And it's always humans that, kind of mess it up somehow. Yep. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's good that you were able to pull out of it. I don't want to scare people into thinking like that any group is going to do that. But I think it's easy to have the ego kind of take over, especially when you become like a spiritual teacher or leader or something. It's pretty easy to have that temptation of, oh, I'm this special person, and I have all these followers, and, then it's like, then we have to, be really careful, because, there is that in the tarot, the ego is also the devil card, which is about money, which is about deception, which is about lust, greed, and like they're all connected, and it's very interesting. It's yeah. There's a lot more we could say about that.
Oh, 100%. We could talk for 5 hours just on that one subject, and that's why I got so into making my business name highly optimized, right? Because for me, I was like, well, what do you do, right? What do you do if you're someone who's out there with the best of intentions? You're looking for a group to join or like an outlet for spirituality, wellness, optimization, whatever it is. And yet you're hearing this and you're aware of like, oh man, there is a lot of, interesting stuff, let's just say, going on in the world. No judgment towards people, right? But humans be humans, and they do human things. So like, what do you do, right? Well, what we're talking about with discernment, right? What we're talking about with the ability to connect to the unseen realms, right? And the causal realm. And what we talk about with being able to access the Akasha records, like all of these things are dependent upon a system that is physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually optimized, right? So, this comes into the way of like everything from your diet, right, to your fitness, to your, spirituality, to everything. And when you're in that type of state where you're optimized, you're going to be able to feel the resonance or the lack of resonance to a deeper degree. And it doesn't mean that you'll always act on it. Like it still took me a while, right? But at least you're set up for success, because if you have a lot of distortions from an overly calcified body, if you're putting glyphosate into your body and these types of things by eating fast food and whatnot, it's going to be really hard for you to wield the power of discernment, because discernment takes energy. It takes critical thinking sometimes, and critical feeling. I think I would actually translate that to be able to weigh things and be like, what does this feeling remind me of? And when I've felt this and gone forward with it, what have been the results I've gotten in life before, right? That could probably be a really good sign of what's going to happen this time, versus what about this feeling over there? What do I like about that feeling? Where has that feeling led me in my life? And now you get to actually start to pick apart the different feelings and different vibrations you feel and what the results of those things are. And when you start tapping into that, it makes it much easier to recognize like, oh, that person I want to learn from is actually the lighthouse I'm looking for, right? Like they are saying all the right things, right? They're saying, hey, just like Jesus, anything I can do, you can do.
Yes.
Don't worship me. I'm just a messenger. I'm just here to turn you on, right?
Exactly.
And to be able to allow your lighthouse to light up so you can now go out and start doing it for other people, and that's like all I've ever wanted to be in my work. It's what I love about Aaron so much. It's what I love about your energy. Like, it's just like there are so many amazing people out there, and so guys, for anyone listening, like just like Rachel said, don't get nervous about it, right? It makes it a fun challenge. And none of the people you meet, it's not like they're bad people or anything, right? They just might be living through distortions. And that's where compassion comes in handy, right? But also a clear line of discernment, like, hey, I can have compassion and keep you at arm's distance. Yeah. So yeah, it's really funny.
Which is questioning everything, and that's what, just training ourselves to just say, okay, I'm not going to just blindly accept everything I'm told and accept that it's truth, but take it through my filter. Like, does it resonate with me? Does it feel right? Does it land in my body? And then we're taking back our power, or we're taking back our, I guess, agency, over our own well-being and responsibility for our own well-being. And that well-being, and that is really the Christed grid, which is, back to what I was talking about, the Stonehenge and the sacred sites and Glastonbury. Like really there's a grid, and that all around the planet, and we're all just plugging into that light grid. Different people are helping to teach and activate others to then share that light and activate to pay it forward. And it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's so exciting. Like I've said this so many times on the podcast, but it bears repeating because it's so accurate. And like, I think it's hilarious. I really feel like where we're at right now for like people like you and I, people like listening to this show right now, it's no doubt it's been challenging, right? Like the last 3 years, even though many of us saw through the illusion, we might have still had family members pass away. We might have still had darkness, face us. And so like, I don't doubt for everyone that it's been hard in some way, right? But at the same time, it kind of feels as though we're at that point in Independence Day where shit's really going to hell in a handbasket real quick. And the president goes to Area 51 to go talk to the scientists underground. And the president's like, man, it's crazy up there. Like shit's going to hell in a handbasket real quick. How's everything down here? And he's expecting like a somber answer. And the guy with the gray hair is like, dude, are you kidding me? Life has never been this good. We've had this spaceship for like 30 years. It hasn't done shit. And now all these buttons are lighting up. Like for the first time, we're going to get to fly. Like this is awesome. And the president's like, what is wrong with you? Right. So at the same time, like that's kind of what I feel like right now, where, a lot of people say, oh, the world there's so much darkness right now. It's never been this bad. Right. But what I think about it is like, well, has it never been this bad? Or is it just that we've never been so aware as a collective right now? Like there's just more light hitting the planet. And just the same as when you open a dark room for the first time in a long time, what's the first thing you notice when you flip on the light? You notice how messy the room is. It's why we all dread cleaning our closet or cleaning our room because the first thing we got to do is accept how dirty it is before we can start cleaning it. And some of us, right, in this metaphorical room have already been cleaning for a while. Maybe some of us have cleaned rooms before. And so this is a new room, but we're kind of used to it. Maybe this one's messier. But then certain people in our collective, maybe this is the first dirty room they've ever seen. And so for them, it's really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so it's up to us that have either cleaned rooms before or in the process of cleaning their end to be like, hey, man, you just start in one corner and put on some music and eventually the whole room's clean. Just come join us, you know? And I think that's like really the beautiful future that I see. And I'm very optimistic about it because I choose to be like, what other option is there? You know, like if I get to create my reality, why would I want to expect that everything that's happening is doom and gloom and there's no reason for it, right?
Absolutely. I love that metaphor. And that, you know, that is exactly the message I pick up on in the Akashic Records. They're continuously reminding me, at least, and I try to share this with others, to disengage from the 3D, like the matrix, really, and just not give our energy to it. You know, so I try really hard to not, you know, I read the headlines just to see what's going on, but I don't try not to get attached to it or get sucked into the narratives. And then it's like, basically that is what's happening, is we're creating our own 4D, eventually 5D reality where we see what's happening. We see, you know, and you know, obviously we don't want to just be like, oh, I don't care that everybody's suffering and just too bad for you, you know, but sending compassion, you know, compassion and hoping to bring as many people as possible into this new earth or new sort of reality, which is not a different planet. You know, some people wonder, are we going to a different planet? No, it's right here. And actually, I know we're going to wrap up, but this is a really cool metaphor that came in the Akashic Records. And I feel like it's applicable to explain like the dimensional kind of split that a lot of us are experiencing. What was shown to me was like a transparency, like on those old overhead projectors where, you know, some of us, I actually had teachers that did that. So you put like a clear transparency and you might write something on one. And so that's one dimension. And then you put another transparency on top of it, and that's another dimension. And so they're two different planes. But if you look at the projection on the wall, they look like they're one. And that, to me, that really kind of makes sense of how it feels. Like we can feel like, okay, we're seeing people in our family or seeing old friends or people that might not be in the same place we're at. We're going to still connect with them, but they're literally on a different plane of existence. They're not seeing the world the way we are, and they're not supposed to. But it may, like, we might still, you know, we go to the grocery store and we go to the mall or whatever sometimes, and like we interact with people, but we're not in the same plane necessarily. Anyway, and it doesn't mean like one's better than another. It's just different, you know. But that ultimately more of us will be in that sort of state of oneness and of acceptance and, you know, telepathic communication and love and all the good things.
Yes, 100%. You know, I always kind of relate it to ice cream. I don't know why the universe decides to speak to me through food analogies, but it happens frequently. And I'm like, all right, I'm going with it, you know, but it's kind of like this, right? So if you really love ice cream, right, you grew up going to like Dairy Queen, right? Which you probably know what Dairy Queen is. I think it's only like an East Coast thing, right? Yeah. So I can say that and it actually makes sense. But, you know, I grew up going to Dairy Queen, right, with my dad. And so, you know, like when I was a kid, I didn't realize that my dad like didn't really like healthy food. Also, healthy food really wasn't big back when I was a kid, right? Like it's very big now. So when I got into health and fitness and everything like that, and I started realizing that like the choices that I make have consequences to them, right? Like not to say that you can't eat ice cream or anything like that, but what I started realizing was like, well, wait a minute. If we now live in a world where I can get either raw milk ice cream if I want to go the dairy route, or I can get like, you know, some nice organic, you know, oat milk or avocado ice cream or something like that, then why would I ever go back to Dairy Queen, right? But yet there are still people, if you go by a Dairy Queen, that go to Dairy Queen, right? Doesn't make them bad people, doesn't make them anything. It's just that like different planes, right? Different systems, right? Like I personally still eat ice cream, but when I do, I'll go for like the healthier option to kind of like make sure that I'm not like taking on a decision that's going to give me like a lower vibration in my body. Whereas for other people, they might not even be aware that like food actually makes them feel a different way depending on how they eat and what they eat and the quality of it, right? So I see that as kind of being like an example of a microcosm that can be extrapolated into the macrocosm of what we're talking about right now. You know, it's like, and I see it with, you know, even my mom, you know, like I love her to death and, you know, she's amazing, but also she's one of my biggest teachers, you know, because can I see her in a dimension or wavelength, etc., that I know I would not want to be in. She says she doesn't want to be in, but her actions speak to like, I'm actually perfectly comfortable right here.
Yep.
And can I be there and can I be okay with it without thinking that it's my job to fix her or that I need to give her advice or any of these things? Can I love her for who she is and where she's at? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like really, to me, like what's coming is being able to love without judgment and saying, hey, the hand's here if you want it. But this hand and me thinking you want it is based on my perspective. And so if you don't want that, like, I'm not going to project that onto you, that like I need to be your savior just because I think that you're living life in a way that I wouldn't live. Right. And so I really love this frame of thought because I really think that's how we move forward. Right. Like being able to go, hey, this is what I choose for me.
Yep.
But at the same time, like I'll allow anyone in my life that I love, that treats me amazing and loves me, to live their life however they want to. You know, it's really cool.
And that I absolutely picked up on that too. I learned pretty quickly that trying to wake people up did not work. Yeah. In fact, it made them even more angry at me. So I realized, and that was a big learning for me. And what came in the records for me was, you know, just can you accept them? And the same thing with like family members, you know, like just they think that you're trying to change them and it makes them feel like they're not enough. And that, you know, and I was like, well, that's horrible. I don't want to do that, you know? So just, like, and that for some people, they're not ready. They're not they might see it. I actually had somebody, I didn't say this person, but who said, you know, I don't want to see that stuff. I just want to have my cup of coffee, read the paper every morning. I see it. I don't want to be, I want the blue pill. Like literally just, I don't want the red pill. I want the blue pill because that's all I'm ready for. Like literally this person said this to me. And I was like, well, that's your choice. You have, that I can't argue with that. Like, you have free will. That's your choice. And my job, like you just said, is, you know, ideally just to honor and respect where you're at and meet you, you know, connect with you in other ways, you know, that where you feel safe.
Definitely. 100%. And when you're that lighthouse, the best part is like, you know, Rachel, my partner, actually, I forgot she has the same name as you. So and what she would say is spell it the right way too. Yes. She spells it the same way.
The right
None
way.
Of that AEL stuff, you know? Yeah. Cool. But she said something the other day that at first kind of like, not like triggered me. Like I feel like triggering like is such like a buzzword. Like it just like made a certain feeling in my body or brought up a certain feeling in my body. But she was like, you know, I don't want to help people on purpose anymore. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? And like, it kind of was like, well, no, like, you know, because we're both in roles of service and things like that. And she was like, well, no, listen to me. Like, you know, and she was like, when I'm like going out and trying to help people on purpose, sometimes what happens is I don't find the right people. And then they end up getting frustrated at me. I end up getting frustrated with them. And it was just kind of like something that probably shouldn't have happened. Right. Versus, you know, if you're that lighthouse, right, and you're emanating that frequency of love and you're talking about what really builds you up in the world and you're being honest, right? You're not saying sometimes maybe I like this and oh yeah, you're saying like, this is me, right? This is me unfiltered, right? If you do that and you're that lighthouse really talking about what you're passionate about, the right people for you, right, for your lighthouse will naturally start coming to you and start asking, hey, Rachel, you look really happy. What have you been doing? Right. And they'll make these invitations that show you on a soul level, like, I am ready. Then you have to figure out how deep they're ready to go. Right. But at the same time, like they're curious. And that was like one of the biggest like breakthroughs I ever had was realizing like, oh, all I have to do, like all I get to do is just be me and be me unfiltered, right? Be the goofball I am, you know, be the loving individual I am, and the right people will find me and everything's going to be okay. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I've really been able to tap into in my life. So yeah, it reminded me of that when you were saying it.
That is beautiful. May it be so for us all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Rachel, this has been so much fun. I can't wait to have you back on for round 2. I'm excited to come see you in Maine sometime. Yes. We get to actually see each other in real life because we live close enough together.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I want to make sure I give people the opportunity to know where they can find you, where they can find all of your amazing services. If the book is out already, where they can find it, or when it's going to be out, when they can find it, or where they can find it. Tell the people everything.
All right. So, yeah, the best way to find me is soulfulworkconsulting.com is my website, or rachelhortonwhite.com. And the book is out last year, and I have done this weird sort of way. I didn't put it on Amazon. I just self-published it, put it on my website. It's still there. So if you want to get the book, that's where I might put it on Amazon. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm deciding. But right for now, it's on my website, and there's all kinds of, tools similar to things we talked about, ego exercises, how to quiet the mind, meditate, even how to read the Akashic records, connect with past lives, ancestors, angels, opening the third eye. I talk about all that stuff, and it's, like experiential things that I've done in my own life, and then like case studies with clients. And and I think, I'll just mention this too, in case anybody's interested, because we were talking about breaking patterns. I'm doing a hypnotherapy class. It's a free class online, a virtual class in a few weeks, October 11th, which may or may not be when before or after this actually comes out, but that it'll be like an opportunity to like actually get some hypnosis, clear some stuff away, step into your highest self. And I'm a big fan of hypnosis and the power of what it can do. So yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. I'd love to attend that free class. I think I'll be in Virginia, but I should have internet access and everything. So definitely send me the link for that. I'd love to join. Like, I did some hypnosis work with a woman named Rose Sipple, and I enjoyed it a lot. She's also a Kabbalah teacher. That's how I found her. And it was powerful and profound. It's still like, it can be subtle, right? It can be not so subtle, but these ones were more subtle belief systems. And so it took me a little bit of time to realize like, oh, wow, like I'm actually not living into those anymore. And guys, for everyone listening, like this shit is real. Like it really works. Like, it is really spectacular, and you can really get it, right? Like you can really have a life where you're not limited by the things you currently feel limited by. And definitely check out Rachel for all of those things. And Rachel, I got one last question for you. And that question is this. So let's say someone listens to this episode and they're super excited to dive into psychedelic medicines in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that you would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment, there's that word again, possible to be able to know if these plants are right for them in their lives at this particular time?
Well, the first thing that comes to me is to sit with the plant, the actual plant. But if you don't have it, sit with the spirit of the plant and connect with the spirit of that plant and ask it, what is it? What's its intention for you? How can it help you? Is it of the light? And that's a simple thing. Like, is this of pure unconditional love and pure of the light? And you'll hear that, you'll be able to pick up on something with our free will choice. We do have the ability to say, yes, I want this in my space, or no, I don't. And that's a divine law. So it's a law that everything has to respect. I mean, it's just how it's like gravity. So that, and I guess just one thing I'll add to that is feeling light through your body. Just like I said before, just bringing in that light and connecting through your heart with the spirit of that plant or whatever that is, how you're intending to connect deeper in your consciousness, and your heart will guide you.
I love that. Oh, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Definitely make sure to go give Rachel a follow. Keep up with all of her updates and all of her creations. She is amazing, and she is here to help you. For anyone who enjoyed the show, we'd super appreciate it if you gave a 5-star review. It really helps us get the show out to more listeners. And until next time, wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having the best day of your entire life. And until next time, may the force be with you to infinity and beyond. Peace.